big stories. The Department of Foreign Affairs summons China's charge d'affaires Zhou Ziyong to protest the latest water cannoning incident by Chinese vessels. It also instructs the Philippine Embassy in Beijing to lodge a protest.
The NBI fails to bring fugitive Teves back to the Philippines, even after the ex-congressman was arrested very publicly at a golfing range.
And we'll be speaking later on with DOH Spokesperson Dr. Albert Domingo about the ongoing outbreak of Pertussis, or whooping cough, in Quezon City and Iloilo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Regina.
I'm Gretchen.
And I'm Shawn.
Another day, another run-in with Chinese vessels out at the West Philippine Sea. Over the weekend, China Coast Guard fired water cannons at a Philippine resupply boat, that's the Oneida May 4, which is en route to the Union or Second Thomas Shoal.
The blast injured 3 Navy officers and caused heavy damage to the boat. And if the name of the boat sounds familiar, yes, because it was reported before. This is at least the second time this month that the Oneida May 4 was water cannoned by China.
The incident has prompted another round of diplomatic actions from both sides. Let's get more details from our mobile journalist, Marimon Reyes, who covered that maritime research mission to Pag-asa Island that also took place over the weekend. Hi, Marimon. What exactly happened?
Ladies, it has been quite an eventful weekend to say the least, with this latest maritime encounter with China that unfortunately led to injuries for the Philippine side. It was another round of David versus Goliath after the China Coast Guard blasted the resupply boat Oneida May 4 this Saturday. What was supposed to be a routine resupply mission to the BRP Sierra Madre in a Union Shoal also became a cat and mouse chase. I got to witness firsthand the maritime aggression that Filipino fisher folks, PCG, and BFAR personnel talk about.
So dun pa lang, ang dami na nila, 1, 2, 3, 4, eto 5, 6, dun sa likod, 7, 8. So naharangan tayo ngayon ng China Coast Guard, itong vessel na to. Pero hindi lang yan. Kung makikita nyo, ito ang Oneida May, yung nagbibit-bit ng mga supplies para sa resupply mission na ito. Pero kada maneuvers na ginagawa nito, binubuntutan at kino-corner ito ng CCG at saka ng iba pang mga militia vessels. So kahit nga tayo, hindi tayo makagalaw sa ngayon.
The Oneida May 4 sustained heavy damage from the water cannons. But what's worse is, 3 Philippine Navy officers got injured from this incident. They had to be transferred to BRP Cabra for treatment after getting hit in the head, eyes, and foot. They were reportedly in the bridge of the supply boat when the high-pressure water from the cannon hit them. Ladies, we started off last week hoping to focus on marine life assessment and research in the West Philippine Sea. But with this new water cannon incident, it seems there's a new round of high-level engagements needed to settle the heat between the Philippines and China at this point. Back to you.
Thanks so much for that update, mobile journalist Marimon Reyes.
Mas deliberate nga yung blocking maneuvers of the Chinese Coast Guard before we were debating on who took which route, right? If it was the Philippine vessels that blocked the Chinese ships or the other way around. But now it's clear. It's very evident na we would see reverse blocking maneuvers. Kumbaga parang nalagpasan mo na, dito na sa may star, aatras pa yung Chinese Coast Guard to block our ships. And there were 3 ships blocking our vessel on the way to Ayungin Shoal.
Ang gaganda rin ng mga video footage. I believe maraming journalists rin yung sumama sa research mission na ito. Maraming scientists also. But also as expected, China did defend its actions vehemently. The Chinese embassy in Manila said that it has lodged representations over the illegal trespassing of Philippine resupply vessels into the Run Ai Jiao. The embassy said it was a deliberate and provocative move that infringed upon China's sovereignty and maritime rights and interests and undermined peace and stability in the South China Sea. The DFA, meanwhile, summoned the embassy's charge d'affaires to convey its protest over the incident. The Philippine embassy in Beijing has also been instructed to lodge the same démarche with the Chinese Foreign Ministry. The DFA said that China's continued interference with the Philippines' routine and lawful activities in its own exclusive economic zone is unacceptable. The Philippines demands that Chinese vessels leave the vicinity of the Ayungin Shoal and the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone immediately. The DFA also said that the Philippines has made sincere efforts to implement the instruction of President Marcos and President Xi to lower tensions. However, China's aggressive actions call into question its sincerity in lowering tensions and promoting peace and stability in the South China Sea. As for backup, the DFA said that the Philippines is getting support from at least 20 countries. Several diplomats have posted messages online to show their support for the Philippines, including, of course, from the country's biggest allies, the United States, Australia, Japan, the European Union, and the United Kingdom. Most condemned China's dangerous actions and called on all parties to respect the 2016 arbitral award. So, Regina, I know you're keeping a tally. You have a spreadsheet in your head.
No, just because we have another round of diplomatic wrangling. The tally stands at 14. That's the number of diplomatic protests that we've lodged against China this year alone. And 147 is the total number of diplomatic protests overall under the administration of President Bongbong Marcos.
Right, of course, we know I always complain that we keep lodging these protests, but a lot of the analysts that we've spoken to have explained that these protests actually serve as an official legal record in case of future arbitrations. Now, speaking of arbitration, yun din yung naging challenge ni Defense Secretary Gibo Teodoro sa China. Let's listen to what he said.
Kung talagang gusto nila, kung talaga siguro, hindi sila natatakot na ihayag sa buong mundo ang kanilang claim, bakit hindi tayo magpa-arbitrate sa ilalim ng international law para maliwanag sa lahat kung ano ang karapatan ng kahit sino.
I was actually speaking with the PCG Commodore J. Tariela over the maritime research
Which you
mission,
joined for one
which
day.
I joined for one day. And he was saying that reporters keep on asking him, bakit nga ba paulit-ulit lang? Because yun yung criticism natin. It's the same thing happening over and over. Water cannon, we protest, and then again and again and again. And he said that, you know, we can't accept this as normal. We have to keep on fighting and keep on voicing out. Or else it becomes the new normal.
Because
Kumbaga,
the
na-normalize.
alternative is
Yes.
if you don't do anything, every time an incident happens, then it becomes
Worse.
yes.
And then it also just lapses into the black hole of memory. I
But there
suppose.
are questions, of course, about how we do our resupply missions. If we should do it the same way over and over again, given that our military men are getting hurt. And I think we have to ask that question and hopefully get an answer from retired Rear Admiral Rommel Ong, who is currently serving as professor of Praxis at the Ateneo School of Government. Good evening, Mr. Rommel.
Good evening, Gretchen. Good evening, Shawn. Good evening, Regina. Good evening to your viewers.
Okay, Rommel, as a former Navy man, can you give us some insight as to how we conduct our RAdm missions? Nakita naman po natin, no, for 2 consecutive missions, meron na po nasasaktan ng mga Navy men with it. Should we keep doing the same thing by sending a small chartered boat like Unaiza May 4 at bakit yun po ang nagiging strategy natin?
Okay, I think what we did was we framed yung actions natin for the past several years under yung narrative na tinatawag na white on white or white versus white. And because of that, we have tempered down and limited our options on the way we approach, for example, resupply missions.
Okay,
Now,
so
at some point, let's i-remind lang natin na the Sierra Madre is a Navy outpost. The supply boat is manned by Navy personnel. But the context in the way we do resupply is as if parang civilianized or tempered down yung mission yan. Now, if you look at the inventory of resources ng Navy, hindi lang naman limited yan dun sa Unaiza May type supply boat. There are other resources that we can use. But we have tempered down our actions in a way kasi we're trying to create the situation na parang we do not want to escalate. But at some point, mauubos yung Unaiza May, yung supply boats natin by attrition. The tactics being employed by the Chinese Coast Guard, I would term it mission kill tactics. mission kill meaning you're trying to create significant damage to the vessel, not necessarily to sink it, but just enough to make it inoperable. Okay? And at some point, mauubos yung supply boats na yan, and we will end up with no means. If we still keep on the white narrative, mauubos yung options natin in terms of supply boats.
Okay, Admiral, so basically what you're saying, strategic, no, ang paggagamit nitong tinatawag nilang quote-unquote small indigenous wooden boats. Of course, para malinaw na hindi barko ng Navy ang ginagamit. So it's tempered down on purpose, but at which point, no, pag naubos na nga yung barko, like you're saying, it will hit that point, what do we do? And at what point do we change our strategy? Do we have to wait for all the Onaiza maize to run out?
My personal sense is they're going to shift yung tactics nila because of this latest incident. As to what form or shape yung new tactics will be, we'll just see. But as I said, there are other options. There are other vessels in the Navy inventory that can be used to resupply Sierra Madre. And I think ang makikita natin dito in the next few weeks would be a revision of the tactics.
What about this incident specifically, Admiral, no, gives you the idea na parang baka good time na ngayon mag-shift ng tactics or ng strategy? Was there anything specifically harsher or more aggressive this time around?
I think yung pulse ng Filipino public medyo napupuno na eh. Medyo na siya eh, parang napupuno na yung PC niya. And I think at some point it will ask government or ask our authorities, hanggang dyan na lang ba yan? Do we still continue taking the hit, yung water cannon, and have our personnel exposed to significant injury? So I think yung sentiment ng Filipino public, general public, will more or less compel government to look at different innovative ways of trying to revise yung tactics nila ngayon.
What are some of these other vessels that you're talking about that the Navy could use for these RAdm mission?
Well, I've been asked by international media. The most obvious option would be to use a helicopter actually to resupply Sierra Madre. Okay? And that is in the inventory of the Navy that can be used. Okay? The other one would be light craft that has a lower draft that can actually penetrate yung shoal, yung dangerous areas part of the shoal, yung mababaw. There are also assault boats that can speed up to around 30 to 40 knots, but it requires a mothership. Okay? And it can carry 25 people at the minimum or significant number of supplies. Okay? That will be difficult to intercept. Okay? So those are some types of some of the inventories in the Navy's fleet that can be employed actually.
But in your opinion, personally, which option do you think is best at this point, given how high the temperature is now with China?
I'll do it through vertical replenishment, helicopter.
Okay, but if we use helicopters, Admiral, no, I think Gretchen was there and she was telling us may helicopter ng Chinese helicopter was circling over the boats also. Kung magtaas tayo magpalipad tayo ng sarili nating chopper, di kaya may ganun din yung magyayari naman pero sa air na maghahabulan doon or kung ano man?
There's always that possibility of escalation. But remember, we're now going to use military assets, military resources. Iba na yung dynamics nun as compared to using a supply boat that has the persona of a civilian vessel. Okay. Iba na yung iba na yung dynamic nun.
Admiral, do you agree with the transparency offensive that the Philippines is undertaking and the way we're doing it? I think when you say being transparent, you can do it a lot of ways. Like you can, in terms of timing, in terms of what you release, in terms of how you do it. For one, we announced that we were going to do this RAdm mission beforehand. So I think China anticipated it. They probably put themselves on guard against it. Do you agree that this is the best way possible, or do you think there's another way we can do it better?
Well, to be honest, Gretchen, hindi mo naman masikreto yan eh. Kasi Mischief Reef is just a few nautical miles away from Second Thomas Shoal. So, monitor naman nila yung ano natin, yung traffic natin, yung movement of vessels natin. But if you're asking about yung transparency or the way we provide information to the general public and to the international audience, my take dito is it has to be in synergy with other approaches. Yung public diplomacy part natin, yung military component niya, and yung economic component natin, which we call in the military yung DIME, diplomacy, information, military, and economic levers of power. It works in synergy. Now, kung i-isolate mo lang doon sa transparency in terms of conveying the information, tapos hindi siya naka-in-sync the other actions mo, mabubutasan ka doon. Now, in this case, we try to be open in terms of yung ginagawa natin. But you can be only transparent only so much yung pwede mo ilabas. Okay? And at some point, pinag-aaralan mo rin kung ano yung ilalabas mong information
Okay. Admiral, I'm sure you heard that our Defense Secretary, Gibo Teodoro, has actually spoken out. He challenged China na mag-arbitration na lang. What do you think of that call from no less than our Defense Secretary? Is that in itself part of the Philippine strategy? Or pwede ba nating ituloy yung arbitration at this point? Or do we keep collecting note verbals and keep lodging diplomatic protests?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but from my understanding, that legal issue has been resolved by the PCA ruling already. That as far as the Second Thomas Shoal is concerned, it's within our exclusive economic zone. So whatever we do there in that specific to Second Thomas Shoal, that's within the right ng Pilipinas. Okay? So it's not an issue that can be contested by China outright. Okay? Now, I do agree na yung diplomatic protest medyo parang nakakainis na rin ba na parang hanggang doon na lang ba tayo. Okay? But as you said earlier, we need to do this protesting kasi it's a matter of public record or international record that we convey yung ating disagreement or objection to whatever actions China is taking as arising from these various incidents.
Sir, I note with interest that you've also studied minilateralism within ASEAN, and I wanted to get your thoughts on how ASEAN has been responding to this. So just as things are heating up over here in the West Philippine Sea, you also have countries like Malaysia, whose Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim said, well, they don't have a problem with China and don't go up against China, he warned just recently. What do you make of all this? Can we rely on ASEAN for anything?
Okay, the result of my study on ASEAN with respect to minilaterals, it will work on non-traditional security concerns. For example, I take the example of the trilateral cooperative arrangement in Dumalfi, which is specifically to address yung transnational terrorism in the Sulu-Celebes Sea. So it worked because it's a non-traditional security concern, transnational terrorism. But for traditional security concerns, minilaterals will not work for ASEAN. Number one, there are many divergent issues that drives ASEAN apart. Okay, so ang lumalabas actually ang Pilipinas is parang outlier within ASEAN as far as South China Sea concerns and as far as how we deal with China in this issue in the South China Sea. Kaya ang kinalabasan doon sa study, if we are going to look at a minilateral as a construct of engaging other countries to like-minded countries, we look at countries or middle powers outside of the ASEAN. But probably that will work. And makikita natin, this is slowly emerging dito sa, and it will happen this April. Magkikita yung President of the United States, si President Marcos, at saka yung Prime Minister ng Japan. The trilateral between those three countries is a minilateral. So it works, but not necessarily with ASEAN countries.
So in short, we shouldn't rely on our neighbors for much of a support on this issue.
Wala. Outlier tayo. We have to We have to accept that.
But in your opinion, can we rely on our treaty partners na mas hindi natin immediate neighbors, but like you mentioned, Japan, Australia, UK, EU, US?
Okay, I've been asked that question before, and I normally get into trouble, particularly among those who are pro-US. So, I would say, at the end of the day, we need to rely sa sarili natin. Okay? Doon muna, kasi before we ask other countries to help us, let us help ourselves first. I know that's a big ask and madaling sabihin, mahirap gawin. But unless we do that, hindi rin tayo respetuhin ng ibang countries, even our allies and partners. If we approach it from a what I call a mendicant attitude, a mendicant thinking na tulungan mo kami, but pag tinanong tayo, tinutulungan ba niyo yung sarili niyo? So I think ang answer doon is we need to look at ourselves first, capacitate ourselves first.
Admiral, is that the reason why we haven't seen joint patrols in situations like these? Usually, they're exercises far from, the tensions. Do you think that's the reason why we haven't seen? I mean, out of proving to the rest of the world that we can be independent, we can protect ourselves, and we're not a puppet or we're not an extension of a bigger superpower.
Okay, as far as I recall, there are at least 2 joint patrols on record. And the latest one, I think, happened in January. I may be wrong. I think there might be a third one. But you must remember, itong joint patrols were part of the commitments between the Philippines and the U.S. in its bilateral security dialogue and its bilateral security guidelines that was, I think, signed last year by the Department of Defense of the United States at sa Department of National Defense natin dito sa Pilipinas. So, it's there, but it's not something that, andyan ka agad. So, you have to work at it. Aside from the joint patrol, we have those exercises. I think we will have another balikatan exercise this coming summer. So, that in itself is also another way of projecting the solidarity among like-minded states in terms of addressing South China Sea issue problem.
Okay, Admiral, very quickly lang, no, yung nabanggit yung capacity building, no, na let's work on ourselves first, let's build up our own capabilities. Kasama po ba doon yung ginagawa natin ngayon under the AFP modernization? Would you consider that as part of our capacity building?
Yes, basically yun. I think they've already approved the Re-Horizon or yung Horizon 3 program, which now they call the Re-Horizon program. But hindi lang kasi yung AFP modernization yung kailangan i-capacitate. The missing piece dito is yung developing the industrial capacity ng Pilipinas. Okay? Military modernization does not operate in a vacuum. It requires an industrial ecosystem to support it. Okay? So what we're looking at dito is using the modernization of military as a sort of an incubator to help private sector, yung industry natin also to level up. Okay? Basic lang, example for the Navy. You need the shipbuilding and ship repair capacity, capacity building effort. I think let's say for example, yung frigates that we acquired from South Korea, I think last year we need to send them back to South Korea for maintenance. Okay? So, right there and then, makita mo na, we need to develop the capacity to have them maintained dito sa Pilipinas. Okay? Kasi dadaan pa yan ng before you hit South Korea, dadaan ka ng China somewhere. Okay, so we're creating a vulnerability with that setup. Okay.
All right, thank you so much for your time and insights. We hope to hear more from you on that end of the West Philippine Sea. We have with us tonight retired Rear Admiral Rommel Ong.
A court in Moscow has accused 4 Tajik nationals of committing terrorist attacks in Russia 3 days after the deadly attack that killed at least 137 people. According to the preliminary court in the Basmani district of Moscow, the suspects in the case are Tajik citizens residing in Russia. The suspects are Dailerjon Mirzoyev, Saidak Rami, Ratcha Balizoda, Shamsidin Fariduni, and Mohammed Sobir Faisal. Local media say all four have pleaded guilty. Terrorist group ISIS has since claimed responsibility for this attack. Russia's security services also announced the arrest of 11 individuals on charges of involvement in the Friday massacre inside a concert hall. Russian President Vladimir Putin has since vowed to punish all those responsible. He, however, also alleged that attackers had sought to escape towards Ukraine. Putin said preliminary information showed that some people on the Ukrainian side had prepared to let them cross the border from Russia.
They tried to hide and were moving in the direction of Ukraine. There, according to the preliminary data, they had a crossing of the border prepared from the Ukrainian side. Overall, 11 people were detained. All the executors, planners, and those who are ordered this crime will be rightfully and inevitably punished, whoever they are and whoever directed them. Let me repeat, we will identify and punish everyone who stood behind the terrorists who prepared this attack against Russia and against our people.
Meanwhile, outside the concert hall, hundreds of residents laid down flowers in tribute to the victims, while cleanup efforts continued inside. The Kremlin has also lowered its flag to half-mast in mourning for the most severe attack on Russia since 2004. Yesterday, a national day of mourning was declared following the incident. President Bongbong Marcos has since extended his condolences to the victims of the attack. He said, "We stand united in condemning terrorism in all its forms." Earlier, the Foreign Affairs Department had already expressed condemnation of the heinous attack. The Philippine Embassy in Moscow has also said that no Filipino was affected.
Up next, the SEC makes good on its threat to ban Binance in the Philippines. The details when we return. Stay with us. You're still watching the big story here on One News.
Right, another quick update. NBI personnel that went to Timor-Leste to pick up ex-congressman Teves have already returned to the Philippines empty-handed. That's right, without the fugitive. So why were they not able to bring him home even after he was arrested very publicly? Let's bring in Mojo, or mobile journalist Julie Baiza, to tell us what happened there. Julie, ano nagyari kay Teves? Bakit hindi siya naiuwi?
Shawn, until now, ousted congressman and Degamos Lay suspect Teves is still in the hands of the Timor-Leste police. Teves has remained under their custody since he was arrested in Dili on Thursday while playing golf. Representatives of the National Bureau of Investigation went to Timor-Leste over the weekend to pick Teves up, but they failed to bring him back home because Teves still has to face the court in Timor-Leste. Despite this, NBI Director Medardo de Lemos says their mission in Timor-Leste can be considered a success.
First stage, hindi tayo ganun ka-hopeful. Ang una nating exploratory lang, tsaka confirmation na andun siya. Kasi lahat naman yan ay, all of that would depend when you operate in a foreign territory. It would depend on how aggressive and how determined the counterparts would be. Pero ito nakita natin na 2 hours after landing, kinuha nila kaagad. Baka hindi tayo dumating doon, baka hindi sila ganun ka-agresibo mag-enforce ng red notice list.
The NBI also clarified that they were not part of the team that arrested Teves because they cannot join the reinforcement team of the Timorese police. The NBI said, though, that they tried to speak with Teves after his arrest or at least get proof that he is in the detention room in Timor-Leste. They say they were given a hard time by the Timorese authorities. But they eventually got clearance only after reaching out to Timor-Leste President Jose Ramos Horta.
Nararamdaman namin na talagang pinapahirapan kami. So, wala. Humingi kami ng audience kay President Horta. Nagpasalamat kami. We have one request, Mr. President, addressing myself to President Horta. May we be allowed to take the photographs of Congressman Teves so that we can report to our President, our Secretary of Justice, that indeed the person arrested was Congressman Teves.
The NBI says the former congressman appears strong and healthy. But De Lemos said Teves expressed fear of returning to the Philippines.
Takot akong bumalik ng Pilipinas. Natatakot siya na baka daw may mangyaring masama sa kanya. Ang sabi ko naman sa kanya, Sir, sabi ko, yan ang naging commitment namin kay President Horta. At commitment ng agency yan, commitment namin sa inyo, na walang mangyayaring masama sa inyo. Pag sumama na at maibalik na kayo sa Pilipinas.
But the NBI told Teves that the President of Timor-Leste wanted him to be sent back to the Philippines expeditiously.
Kung nakausap namin si President Horta, ang sinasabi nga niya, gusto rin niyang matapos kaagad ang proseso. May court process dyan, ang pagkakaintindi namin doon sa kanila, a minimum of 7 days to maximum of 40 days mariresolve yan.
For now, the court trial of Teves in Timor-Leste is still ongoing in relation to the red notice issued against him by the Interpol. Teves initially applied for political asylum in Timor-Leste, but this was rejected in 2023. The NBI noted that Teves is now considered a fugitive as his Philippine passport has been cancelled. With that, the NBI is confident that Teves will soon be brought to the Philippines.
Immaterial kasi ang political asylum sa amin kasi cancellation ng passport ang ating approach. Diba? Undocumented alien. Saka ang political asylum is political persecution. Ay itong hinaharap ng mga kaso dito, murder. May proscription ang Anti-Terrorism Council na terrorist. So wala akong nakitang politika doon.
Shawn, Teves' camp, meanwhile, says they are exploring other legal moves, including bringing the case to the UN Commission on Human Rights. Shawn?
Thanks so much for that, mobile journalist Julie Baiza.
The SEC has made good on its threat and announced that it is banning Binance in the Philippines. In a memo issued just this afternoon, the regulator said its Commission on Bank approved on March 12, Tuesday, the filing of a formal request with the National Telecommunications Commission, or NTC, to block Binance's website and other pages here. But again, this was only made public today. It's also working with Google and Meta to block Binance's ads here. SEC Chair Emilio Aquino said they've concluded that the public's continued access to these websites or apps poses a threat to the security of the funds of investing Filipinos. The main issue is that Binance didn't have a license here. But the SEC says it will give the investing public enough time to exit the platform reposition their portfolio in favor of authorized investment products and platforms. Exactly how much time is still unclear since the SEC had warned about shutting down Binance since last year. This is huge news because Binance is, of course, the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world, and this is obviously by far the largest crypto exchange that the SEC has taken on. They've been cracking down on crypto operators for a while now, but the biggest name by far is Binance.
What does this mean for those who have put in money there?
Good question. We were trying to find out from the SEC today, but they were busy fielding media queries, so we will try to get an answer by tomorrow. The SEC did say that they will give the investing public, as I just read, enough time to exit the platform.
So what does that
and
mean? Does that
reposition.
mean you transfer the money that you put in to, like, let's say, an e-wallet? Is that possible?
Or you could cash out, or I don't
Turn it
think
into
it
pesos?
believes. I don't believe rather it means. I don't think it means that you lose the money that's already in there. That's just.
You just lose the
That's-
platform, meaning
Yeah.
you cannot trade anymore on Binance here in the Philippines. So you have to find another platform, or if you want, turn your investment in bitcoins into something else, or cryptocurrency rather,
Yes.
into something else.
Just to give you an idea of how big it is, according to its website, Binance has an average daily trading volume of $65 billion. Daily, that's daily, covering more than 402 cryptocurrencies and with a membership of over 183 million.
And of course, all this is happening just as crypto enters what seems to be a bull market, or the start of one, surging already in recent weeks. Bitcoin is now at around $67,000 right now, or nearly 3.8 million pesos per coin. Now, part of the reason that it has been rallying is that we're seeing more serious money come into it. What we mean by serious money? The large hedge funds in the United States, Wall Street, investing into this product now, and that in turn was because of the approval from the US SEC. They approved Bitcoin exchange traded funds, or ETFs.
Crypto investors in for a rough Holy Week, but we will try to get some answers tomorrow from the SEC. We're going to pause for a quick break right now. Right after that, after Quezon City, Iloilo City has now also declared a Pertussis outbreak. We'll discuss this with DOH Spokesperson Albert Domingo when we return. Keep it here.
watching the big story here on One News.
It's not just Quezon City anymore. Iloilo City has also declared a Pertussis outbreak after a recent spike in cases. Just today, the Iloilo City government officially declared an outbreak after reporting 7 cases of pertussis or whooping cough. Again, this is an infection of the respiratory system, and its common symptoms include coughing for more than 2 weeks, difficulty breathing, runny nose, and vomiting. According to Mayor Jerry Treñas, they have approved a calamity fund of 16 million pesos to purchase medicines and vaccines. In the entire country, 453 cases have been reported, while there are 35 deaths. The health department attributes the rise in cases to the low number of vaccinated infants and babies since the pandemic began. According to DOH Undersecretary Eric Tayag, only 72% of infants who are 18 months old or 1.5 years old are fully immunized with complete vaccines. With this, the DOH aims to reach 95% immunization within 2 to 3 years as they try to address the vaccine shortage immediately.
Maliban sa bumaba yung pagbabakuna, nakalimutan, tinamad, o kaya naman ay ayaw magpabakunan ni mami sa mga baby po nila, nagkaroon din kami ng issue sa supply ng bakuna. Ngayon tayo para naglalagare para ibalik yung sigla sa pagbabakuna. Kaya nagka-catch up immunization kami para na sa ganon, yung mga batang na-miss yung kanilang schedule noong panahon ng pandemic ay mabigyan at makumpleto nila yung bakunang kailangan nila.
Let's try to understand this pertussis outbreak better with DOH Spokesperson Dr. Albert Domingo. Good evening, Doctor. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Good evening, Gretchen, Regina, and Shawn. Thank you for having me here tonight.
Thank you for making time for us. Let's start with definitions first. When I was reading the symptoms, it just struck me how common they are. Persistent cough, runny nose, breathing difficulties. I mean, that could be COVID, that could be your run-of-the-mill cough and colds, that could be tuberculosis. I mean, what distinguishes this whooping cough or pertussis? What's a distinctive symptom, if any?
It's great that you asked that, Regina. The name of the disease, which is whooping cough, comes from the English word whoop, which is the approximation of the sound that it makes. There is a distinct high-pitched whistle or sound after or in between each cough. So that in Tagalog, may halak. So there is a particular sound that this cough makes, which distinguishes it from the other kinds of cough, or your normal cough, as we would say. And if you would also ask if this is comparable to asthma, the difference between asthma and having pertussis is the fact that there is fever when it comes to pertussis because of the infection. There is a microbe involved, and that also distinguishes it from COVID-19. COVID is caused by a virus. This one is caused by a bacteria.
Is this part of the routine vaccines that infants usually take? I mean, for me, this is the first time I'm hearing about pertussis. And where are we lacking in exactly? Because we're seeing now high fatalities.
Yeah, pertussis is actually not new. It's been around since history will say it's around 1600s or maybe 1500s, 16th century, around the time Magellan landed in the Philippines. They were already describing the symptoms of pertussis. The original Filipino name for it is ubong dalahit or tuspirina. You will probably notice that our elders are familiar with this term because there was a time when there was a higher prevalence of pertussis. But for us, in our generation particularly, vaccination coverage did reach a high point sometime in the 80s or 90s. It is part of routine vaccination. In fact, the vaccine that we are advocating for to be used in this particular time is what we call the pentavalent vaccine. It comes alongside diphtheria, tetanus, hepatitis B, and also Haemophilus influenza type B. So this is something which, shall we say, because of the pandemic worldwide, we noticed, not just us, but the WHO in other countries has also noticed that the numbers have been going up because of the inability to vaccinate during the pandemic. And as Undersecretary Tayag also correctly pointed out, for quite some time, there has been a lot of hesitancy when it comes to vaccination after the Dengvaxia problem. So because of that, we are still trying to convince our population to come back to this behavior of getting our kids routinely vaccinated so that we can put an end to this increase in pertussis cases.
Well, forgive me for saying this, no, Dr. Albert, but I think that's just one part of the problem, yung takot no magpabakuna, especially after the vaccine, after COVID. There seems to also be an issue of supply. As we know, we've kind of opened up, things have returned to normal, it's been a couple of years. Why are we still behind with these basic vaccinations? You're right, I do remember it from when I was a child. I did get whooping cough vaccines. So I know that it's pretty standard, but the fact that kumakalat itong sakit, obviously, kulang nga yung pagbabakuna. But it also seems like supply is short. Where do we stand now in terms of procuring these basic vaccines and playing catch up? Nakakahabol na ba tayo?
There are actually doses on hand, Shawn. So yes, there is a supply problem. Perhaps it could be a distribution problem. In a country as large as ours with 17 regions, some regions are able to vaccinate faster than others. There will be higher demand perhaps in some regions compared to others. And what we are doing now is we are reallocating the vaccines that we have on hand. But of course, we are also expecting around 3 million doses to come in as soon as possible. That order has been placed. And you are right, it's not just rather a function of demand, but also of supply. These two particular parameters have to be balanced when it comes to public health so that we are able to deliver that necessary vaccine into the infant or the child.
Doc, aside from Quezon City and Iloilo, which we've already reported on, where else are you guys seeing a spike in pertussis cases?
We are seeing an increase in cases in a lot of regions. Let me just look at the list so I will not read it erroneously. So in particular, regions 1, 2, 4A, 4B, 6, 7, 9, 12, and Caraga. So remember, these are regions. It could be that it is not spread within a large region, but only in 1 or 2 provinces. We have to remember that the definition of a disease outbreak is an excess in the number of cases that we normally expect in a defined geographic area or during a particular season, so that we cannot say that the whole region in those regions that I mentioned in particular are having outbreaks. We have to be very particular on the province or the city, and we actually leave it to our chief executives who are empowered by law to make a determination if they would like to declare an outbreak.
Doc, very basic question. Once you suspect you have this, is there a cure? Where do we go? Should we report it right away? Should we isolate, follow, the usual COVID isolation protocols? Like, what do we do if we suspect somebody has pertussis? Like, if you hear that wheezing sound?
The protocols are not actually new or isolated to COVID. These are what you call respiratory hygiene procedures or even infectious disease protocols. So they've been around and they're very helpful for all kinds of infectious diseases. But as to the question on what to do in particular if we pick up the symptoms, and let me just run through the complete list of symptoms. There will be at an early phase of pertussis, you will have probably runny nose or stuffy nose. You will have the cough, which we discussed, although in younger populations, in babies in particular, they don't resort to coughing. They might actually be cyanotic or they might turn blue when they do cough. There is also low-grade fever running around maybe not to exceed 38 or 39 degrees centigrade. And if you see a combination of these symptoms, or in particular, if you are concerned about any cough which is unusual for your particular patient, it is best advised to seek consultation immediately. There is treatment, there are available antibiotics. There's actually, in my head, I recall at least 4 antibiotic types that can be used for pertussis, which is caused by Bordetella pertussis, the bacteria. The thing is, the treatment ranges in duration from around 7 to 14 days. And if this particular disease is not treated, it could actually take more than that for an individual to heal, and it's particularly harder for kids. So vaccination is still the way to go when it comes. But I'd like to make the distinction that compared to COVID-19 at the start of the pandemic, we really did not know what to do with COVID-19 at the time. It was a new pathogen. This one, it's been around since Magellan was here, and the treatment has been around also for quite some time.
Doc, how do I get infected? And are kids, children, especially vulnerable to this? So if I'm an adult and I eat well, keep healthy, do I have a strong immune system against it? Or if I did not take the vaccine, I still have a high probability of getting it. What is your advice for those our viewers to protect themselves from pertussis?
And also,
do we still need to get vaccinated?
Advice on Pertussis, and also advice for people who are scared of getting the vaccine for fear of side effects.
Thanks. So it's actually a matter of determining what's the best way to prevent this. For those of us who are adults, I would say that, as Gretchen did properly point out, our immune systems will have a high probability of fighting this off, especially if we are certain that we are vaccinated against pertussis. The chances are it's best to ask our parents if they're still around, or if we have our own baby records, that would be a great hint. If we are not sure there is an available vaccine, which we can also take as adults, just be careful if you are pregnant. Please inform the doctor, because particular forms of the vaccines are contraindicated for particular stages of pregnancy. However, we are seeing in the data that more kids are affected compared to adults. And that will probably lead us to conclude that we should prioritize giving the vaccines to our younger population, for our kids. So having said that, should those who are immunocompromised be given this vaccine, subject to what their conditions are, please consult your doctor. And yes, you are also a priority. But this is a far cry from COVID-19, where you would expect the general population to fall in line. The priority would still be the kids, 5 years old and below. And could you remind me of the other questions, please? Oh, the vaccine hesitancy. Yeah,
Yes.
it's come to mind now. So a reassurance to our population that it is much safer to be vaccinated, in particular for this vaccine, for pertussis, because it comes with the other shall we say, diseases, the diphtheria, the tetanus, protection against those other diseases. So it's actually a win-win times 5 if you get the vaccine. And these vaccines have been around for quite some time. If the COVID-19 vaccine, which was studied in just 1 year, is safe, then these are actually studied over many years, over millions, billions of kids and adults even worldwide. So it's better to be vaccinated than to have that whooping cough, which
Doc,
could actually lead to complications.
How is this transmitted again? Saliva?
This is a respiratory disease, so it's transmitted through the air.
Through the
So
air.
if you cough, which also reminds me
Droplets.
about precautions. So cough into your elbow. Don't cough into your hands. It's actually safer to cough into your elbow, because if you cough into your hands, you might spread the disease through handshakes or holding surfaces. And also, it's best to choose well-ventilated areas. These precautions do sound familiar, because we were also saying this during the time of COVID.
Yeah.
But they're also the same protective measures. Face mask is also voluntary, but highly encouraged, especially for kids.
Of course. Thank you so much for explaining all of that very clearly, and I hope that reassures a lot of the people. That was DOH spokesperson Dr. Albert Domingo. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
Just very quickly, before we go on to the next story, I think we have an audio sound bite of what a whooping cough sounds like. If we could just play that very quickly, just so we have an example of what it sounds like, so people know what to look out for. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about the distinctive quality of a whooping cough or pertussis.
Let's hear it.
There we go. There's no mistaking that sound. It's whooping talaga.
It sounds like
It's-
whoever it is has a hard time
Correct.
taking in oxygen.
Well, we might have to remember again to how to sing "Happy Birthday" while washing our hands.
for 2 whole minutes in between. under.
Cough in
Into your
arm,
elbow.
into your arm. Yes. Well, in other news, Malacanang has issued a memorandum circular declaring half-day work in government offices on March 27. That's this coming Holy Wednesday. Memorandum circular number 45 said that this will allow employees to observe Monday, Thursday, and Good Friday on March 28 to 29, as well as facilitate their travel to and from different regions in the country. Half-day work, however, does not apply to agencies whose functions involve the delivery of basic and health services, preparedness or response to disasters and calamities, or the performance of other vital services. The suspension of work in private companies and offices, meanwhile, is left to the discretion of their respective employers.
Right, before we go, we'll leave you with our big pictures tonight. These are scenes from different establishments from all around the Philippines participating in the annual nationwide earthquake drill. There were students, parents, policemen, and even government officials that performed the duck cover and hold technique to simulate how they can protect themselves when an earthquake hits. That's because the National Simultaneous Earthquake Drill is also held to assess the readiness of our government's response should the so-called big one, or a quake with an anticipated magnitude of 7.2 hits Metro Manila. PHIVOLCS has warned that based on their studies, up to 48,000 people could perish if an earthquake of this magnitude occurs in the Greater Manila area. Do you still remember how to duck, cover, and hold? Because sometimes I think we forget. We know how to say it, but
We also forget to sing happy birthday to also washing hands, forget to put on our masks when in
Yes.
crowded
Yeah.
places, sneeze into your elbows, and so on and so forth. So all of these are good reminders.
good reminders ahead of the Holy Week, good habits. But that's it for the big story on this Monday night.
Do we have work on Wednesday?
Yeah?
We do.
Yeah.
We're not part
You're
of
not
that.
government.
Okay, sorry. just clearing that out. We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.